G'day camper. If you were to come to me and say, hey Alex, what's the first camping stove I should get? I would say this. But then you'd go to the store and you'd see this. It's a bit confusing and there are quirks to every single one of them. Well, I'm going to share those quirks and a few solutions with you today. So let's get on to the first stove. This one. The classic suitcase cooker. So I started out camping with one just like it. In fact, I'm willing to bet that a lot of you watching started out with the same. Let us know down in the comments if I'm wrong, eh? So if you're actually shopping for your very first camping stove, maybe you're just getting into camping, not sure if you're going to like camping, not sure what your cooking style is going to be when you're camping, I'll always recommend one of these. They're cheap, which means they're built cheap. The build quality is not great, but they work. Sometimes the knob will break, sometimes this little lever will come off. Their power output is usually in the range of 7 to 9,000 BTU. BTU stands for British Thermal Units. It's just a measure of heat. To put it into perspective, your burners on your gas stove at home are usually in that 10 to 15,000 BTU bracket. When you're shopping for one, look for a ring around the burner here. That's a bit of a wind guard. You won't always find it at this cheap price point. Also look at the spacing of the trivet, because if you've got something like a mocha pot for coffee, this one's not really going to do the job. This milk jug just sits in there. Something everybody loves about them is they're pretty well square, which means the case, wind is coming from here today, case makes a really effective windbreak. Talking about break, actually, the cases do always break. So what do they do well? I've actually got a special guest over there who can tell you much better than me.
I like these things. As far as gas cookers, I've pretty much always gone and bought a butane one, mainly for me because they're a backup. Heat control is pretty good. In any kind of breeze, you really need to have it full send. They suck in the wind, they just do. They suck in the cold. You can use any type of pan on them. That's a good thing. You don't have to get like an induction compatible. You can have a Teflon pan, stainless steel. You can use high carbon steel, cast iron, whatever you like. They've got a relatively broad pattern. I think they work really well with a wok because the flame does curl up quite nicely and give you good even side heat on a wok. But yeah, look, bang for your buck, I don't think you can go wrong, but they're certainly not a premium product.
Now that Harry's got you all excited, just let me bring you back down a bit. I've got two things here that you need to know. So under about 10 degrees Celsius, which is 50 Fahrenheit, you'll see a performance drop in a butane stove. Later on, I'll tell you why that is, and I'll give you some tips to work your way around it. And the second thing I want you to consider is the place of purchase. So you'll find these in camping stores all over the place, but you'll also find them in department stores like Big W here in Australia, hardware stores, Bunnings or Lowe's if you're in the USA, and they'll often be about half price. So this will run you close to 50 bucks in a camping store, $25, maybe even 20 at Bunnings. The same kind of goes for the gas. You can get a 12 pack of gas canisters from a department store for $18. In a camping store, it's usually 4 for $10, but I've kind of only just found this out myself, that not all butane cans are the same. I'll go into that a bit later. The next stove we're going to cover really quickly because it's the same stove as the one we just saw, but with a hot plate. Now, this hot plate locks onto the trivet and fits inside the storage case, so it's a pretty neat, compact little unit. The problem is you can't buy these hot plates separately, so if you think you want this option, you're going to have to choose it from the start. The only material I've ever seen these hot plates made of is cast aluminium with a Teflon coating. Now, that has its own set of challenges.
Teflon is rubbish. I don't use it for anything. It starts to break down at 260 degrees, which is not very hot considering like I cook a steak closer to 500. So you're just eating crap. You can give Alex some footage of me sliding an egg around a stainless steel pan, around a carbon steel pan. If that's not non-stick, I don't know what is. Teflon, you need to use just as much oil. It doesn't really help you. So yes, they're quite convenient in that like they're not very heavy and you can put a lot of stuff on them, but just as a surface, they're not going to last a long time. You can't use metal utensils on them and they're bad for your health. Nah, don't rate them.
Now in my camping adventures, I don't exclusively use butane stoves. I've got a bigger one I prefer to use, but I do always keep this one. So the reason I choose this is just look at the compact size. Opens up, swivel out like that, open your trivet. It's called the Campmaster Spider Stove. Yeah, it's as good as any other, except for the fact that look how open it is. The wind really gets to it, and you need to use like a wind guard, because the box is as tiny as the stove. The box doesn't serve as a good wind guard at all. I do have a full review for this stove, so just look up the top for the link to that. The big twin burner butane stove. Now, it's worth considering at this point that you're stepping into the price of multi-burner LPG gas stoves here. So something to think about is the fact that if you were to go LPG, you've got better cold weather performance, you've got more power to the burners, and you've got cheaper gas costs in the long run. They are, of course, a bit more hassle to set up. You've got to carry a full-size gas bottle, you've got to hook up a hose, but there you go. At this point, it's worth considering that. Now, most of them are going to have this massive barbecue plate. It's the same as we were describing before, cast alley, Teflon coating, got a bit of a grill side here and a flat plate here, and there's usually a drain channel along the back. Take this away and you've got two normal burners. There are models I've seen that come with a sort of integrated flat plate on one side and a pot that goes on the other side. Now, my opinion is that they lock you into a format too much. You're much more versatile with this big barbecue plate that you can remove and just put a pot on one side, or a toaster, or a kettle. You can just use it so many different ways. Now the case, let me go get it. It's kind of too big to use as a windbreak. Because it's so rectangular, it's awkward. Yeah, look, sure, you can block a bit there, but it doesn't go the full length of anything. So the case isn't as good as a windbreak as it is on those smaller stoves. If you want a windbreak, you're probably going to have to go to a camping store and get one of those galvanized fold-out ones that's more than big enough to go around the whole stove. Now, it's worth noting, because it might not be obvious, but this actually needs 2 cans to power it. So if you're using it to its full capacity, you're going to be blasting through twice as much gas. Why does it need 2 cans of gas? Why can't it just run off 1 can between the 2 burners? Well, that brings me to the first important weakness of butane as a fuel source. So weakness number 1 with butane is vapor pressure. At 20 degrees Celsius, which is 68 Fahrenheit, that can is under 29 psi of pressure. At the same temperature, a can of propane is 140 psi. So now you can understand how that little can is going to struggle to power 2 burners, where a big bottle of propane can easily do 4 or more. On the flip side of that, that low vapor pressure is exactly why this stuff's so cheap. It's just a cheap, plentiful byproduct of oil and gas refining, and because it's under such low pressure, just this flimsy disposable can is enough to keep it contained. What happened to your cooking today?
I had off prawns, so we're having frozen dumplings. Hence the beer.
Now, of all the stoves I've shown you so far, wind is going to be a huge problem. Even a breeze is going to be a problem, but not for this one. And you can probably already see why, because there's a frying pan set into the cooker. It might not be as windproof as the Coleman Fire Night. Even that didn't blow it out. But this will definitely do a simmer better than that, even in a bit of a breeze. However, while the Inset frying pan is also its biggest strength, it's also its biggest weakness. You can't use anything except for that. Open it up. That's as much of a trivet as you get. You can't use your frying pan in there, you can't put a kettle in there, you can't do your mocha pot. Now, I do know Pete from Wacker had one and he loved it, but he did say he couldn't really get it hot enough to do a steak properly. My suspicion is the size of the burner. As you can see, the burner runs this whole length and it outlets on both sides. That's exactly what you need for good, even temperature in that big pan, but big burner, it's almost the same as what we were just talking about with the 2 burners. Small gas bottle, butane, low pressure, not going to provide enough pressure for huge heat across a big burner. And to be honest, It's Teflon anyway. We go back to what we were just saying. You're not supposed to cook with high heat on Teflon, so you wouldn't want to do a steak on that. The lid's really handy for doing a stew or something. I've done that before. However, it is glass. So if you're doing a bit more rough four-wheel drive tracks, that might be a concern. And of course, if either of these break, well, it's pretty well useless. Let's understand what's going on here in the cold. Remember earlier I said about the vapor pressure. That can is under 29 psi of pressure. Well, that pressure changes depending on the temperature. At 10 degrees Celsius, or about 50 Fahrenheit, it's a pretty normal spring morning. Pressure in that can reduces to 15 psi, which is still workable for cooking. But the process of vaporization itself actually draws heat from the can to make the vaporization happen, which means the can gets colder. And as you can already see, the lower the temperature, the lower the pressure of the gas. So as that pressure starts creeping down and down, your burner gets weaker and weaker until it stops altogether. Now, some of you watching who have experience with these butane cookers are very well aware that a full can performs a lot better than one that's been partly used. And that's because there's less liquid in the can making contact with the can, which means there's less surface area that that liquid can draw heat from in order to vaporize. But what can we do about it? Well, there's stoves like Snow Peak and the Itawani 35FW. They're very expensive for butane stoves, but they have created a heat strip. A little copper strip takes some of the heat from the burner, and because copper is so conductive, transfers that to underneath the can. Now, if you remember back to the start, I said not all butane cans are the same. Well, this is where we talk about isobutane. So regular butane will stop vaporizing if the temperature gets to minus half a degree or any lower. Isobutane will keep vaporizing all the way down to minus 12. Those more expensive cans of butane you see on the shelves are usually a blend of regular butane, isobutane, and sometimes propane as well. They perform way better in the cold, but yeah, they are a bit pricier. So there you go. You either buy a stove that has that little heat transfer element in it, or you buy the little bit pricier cans of butane that have some isobutane blended. Or you can just take the butane cans to bed with you and keep them warm in a sleeping bag. Before I wrap this up, I leave you with a fact to consider. That about 9 or 10 of these butane cans is the equivalent energy of a 2 kilo gas bottle, which costs about $10 to fill. So stew on that one as you will. If you've got any comments, suggestions or tips around butane stoves, make sure you pop them down there in the comments, and you may just be helping a fellow camper in the future.